Hello and welcome to Dry But Wet's Meet the Maker, a series of conversations with the clever folks who are breaking new ground by creating incredible tasting adult non-alcoholic beverages. This is less about the how and more about the why. We're getting to know the makers behind the brands, discovering their motivations and hopefully replicating a little of the storytelling we're so familiar with from the wine industry. I'm your host, Amy Armstrong from Dry But Wet. I'm a passionate non-alcoholic drinks expert, reviewer, and sober socialite. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the unceded lands on which we live, work, and record these conversations. For me, that's the Gunditjmara people of the Maar Nation. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today on the podcast, I am joined by none other than Amanda Thomson, founder of Thompson & Scott Noughty, a range of two excellent sparkling non-alcoholic wines that you'll find taking over the globe, essentially, nearly every country you can imagine. Ask anyone interested in non-alc wines and they will have Noughty at the top of their list. So welcome, Amanda. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. What a lovely welcome.
I'll let you begin by telling us a little bit about Noughty. Give us your elevator pitch. You're short and sweet.
Sure. Well, I was a champagne obsessive, and the quest really was, could I get the same buzz with an alcohol-free? I mean, that was my elevator pitch.
I think you nailed it.
Bless you. Thank you. The next challenge, because you mentioned I've got two wines, soon to be a family of 5. I've got 3 alcohol-free, still launching. You heard it here first. We've got a red, a white, and a rosé. So Noughty Rouge, Noughty Blanc, and Noughty Rosé, hitting the fridges and shelves across the next 3 to 6 months.
Oh, that's so exciting. What's that process been like for you? Like, obviously you started with the bubbles. Moving to the still, was that a whole another realm of challenge in creating the wines to the quality that you're used to?
It's not so much that still's easier and alcohol-free. None of it's easy to make good stuff. You get mouthfeel, and anyone in the wine business knows that mouthfeel is one of those. It's not such an elusive thing, actually. It is what it says on the tin, and the bubbles create that. So that is obviously directly comparable to champagne or another sparkling wine when you have an alcohol-free.
Yeah.
But if you think particularly about a red, I mean, the red for me has been the most challenging of all, to be truthful. White and rosé too, but with red, you've got that viscosity, you want that richness, you want what they call in wine speak the finish, where something stays with you, and that is exceptionally challenging without the alcohol, actually.
And you've been working on these in South Africa, I believe.
I have, but interestingly, I was mostly working on them through the pandemic when travel was not allowed anywhere, and it was certainly impossible to get from the UK to South Africa. So we had a super complex process where we would talk regularly on Zoom. So the winemaker and I, like we're talking now, would be on Zoom together. And then he would FedEx me samples. I've got very clear ideas about what my brand should taste like. And luckily, I think my studies in wine, because I trained in wine in Paris, were very useful. So I can talk to winemakers in their language, as it were, but we would talk for a long time about what I was really trying to achieve. He would FedEx me samples, then we'd talk again. So this process really of development was predominantly done over Zoom. And it was only very recently when we met in South Africa to sign off. So it just shows what's been possible in the pandemic, albeit adding an extra layer of complexity, no question.
Yeah, that would have made it so much more of a drawn out process, I could imagine. And waiting for those samples and then being like, oh, now we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And it would have just gone on and on and on and on and on.
But, you know, it was possible. And I think while it's been horrendous and we're all trying to put thoughts as best we can, depending where we are in the world behind us, I think if you're used to innovating, then I think that was easier perhaps than for a corporate. I was naturally entrepreneurial. I was used to facing challenges, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think in business, if you're used to facing challenges, I guess that gave me some sort of edge there.
Yeah. And motivation. It's like there's
Right.
a challenge. I'm going to rise to it and I'm going to nail it.
Absolutely. And of course, I saw the opportunity at the end of it. So now I come out with, pretty much a full portfolio almost to market. So yeah, super exciting for me.
And launching 3 at once, that's massive.
Well, actually, we're staggering them. So
Oh,
the
nice.
rosé and white will be coming later. I
Yeah.
think technically for your summer over there in Australia.
Yeah.
And we've got the rouge, Noughty Rouge is coming out very shortly. So it should work for your side of the pond and for us in time for what they call OND in the UK, October, November, December, which is our big sort of retail season.
Yeah, right. I've never heard that before, OND.
Yeah, I think that's a retail sort of acronym, OND, yeah. That's really when you should be doing all your big trade.
Yeah. So for you, where did the motivation to make a non-alcoholic wine come from?
So it started really with my childhood, where I was eating what then was considered in the 70s a plant-based diet. So it was considered pretty hippie and a bit odd. So I used to crave white bread and processed food because I wasn't allowed it, which of course now is achingly fashionable. So my mother was really ahead of the curve. And then I worked for the BBC in the arts world. And back in the day before social media, as I tell my kids, not recommended now, but we used to work hard, play hard. We'd often be up all night and we would often be drinking too much back then. And I was always quite discerning, and champagne was my buzz. But I wasn't really thinking too much about what was in the bottle. And once I started to look at wine and champagne as a category, even fine wine and champagne, I was fascinated by the sugar element and the fact that wasn't really sort of mentioned on labels. And then I had this really interesting light bulb moment, which was recognizing that there was really no transparency in the wine business, conventional wine business, when it came to labeling and ingredients, sugar, chemicals, essentially. And that really led me on a quest to originally work in the alcohol space and create as pure a champagne and sparkling wine range as possible. So I started out with a champagne, actually, historically. And then I really was recognizing that no matter which way I cut it, alcohol wasn't healthy. I mean, we all historically, drinkers, even now in 2022, often are trying to kid ourselves, but we can't pretend it is. And I think legislation is going that way, and science and recognition is, and there's no question, even for those who still love a drink, the truth of it is we cannot promote it as something healthy.
No.
And I really started to wonder what it was about champagne specifically that I loved. And that's when, of course, you break it down to its ritualistic elements and you recognize that alcohol as a component is not really that thing. A lot of it's psychosomatic, and could there be that placebo effect, with getting that buzz and creating that ritual. And then I started to really become obsessed with this idea of creating initially a champagne, but the idea was always a portfolio of alternatives to fine wine, where you could really have an incredible special experience, but without the alcohol. So that was really the start of that journey. And rather than set out to mimic something directly, I've been known always in the wine business, terrible for the facts and figures when I trade. I wouldn't be a good sommelier because I can't remember the appellations, but I'm really obsessed with palate and taste. And so it was, could I create something special that could sit alongside its alcoholic counterpart comfortably, but wasn't alcohol? And that was really what started the quest. And, like all of the best entrepreneurial stories, I think if I knew then how hard it would be, perhaps I wouldn't have done it, which I think is really truthfully what all entrepreneurs will tell you when they've changed their career, but that's probably the reason that most people don't do it. It's interesting now, I'm delighted that in wine I've pretty much paved the way for lots of brands now to have a go. And that for me is brilliant, as long as they're trying to raise the game. What I don't want is any more substandard, really non-drinkable sort of liquids that historically we had, that was really oversaturated, and that when we launched Noughty, we completely set ourselves apart from. So I think probably we were the first global brand to premiumize alcohol-free wine, because it has been around a long time, as you'll know, but most of it for a discerning drinker was not drinkable.
No, and that continues to be the case, and that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because there is such a wide variety in terms of quality. So you've got your Noughtys, and then you've got a lot of other things that are really, really substandard. And if people can get to the good stuff, make it more easily accessible, and they know that it's there, then everyone's winning.
Absolutely, because if your first introduction to alcohol-free wine, which has been the case for many in the hospitality industry, is something really cheap, sugary, really awful, that bears no resemblance to wine whatsoever, then of course it can really taint the perception. And so it's really up to us to educate and say, hang on a second, this is something different. Of course, the only way really to do that, you can talk the talk, but it's in the taste, I think, essentially.
Yeah, it speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? So how many countries is Noughty available in? I know we're lucky, we have very easy access down here in Australia, and I know that you're quite well spread across the US.
So my sales director tells me off because I often miss some out. I mean, it was late 30s. I think, can we hit 40? Australia is a huge one for us, and the US, the UK. I mean, lots of countries are really growing nicely. So some of the countries we're in, we've only just launched, but it's lovely to get established. Hong Kong, China's just starting. So there's lots of places around the world that you can get hold of it. Canada's very big for us as well.
Yeah. And I see that you're also, you're being quite clever about where you're getting the product. Like, you're working with airlines, I believe, and...
Yeah, that's been exciting, Amy. Yeah, we've just started. We've been working with BA and Virgin Atlantic. So BA, we're in some of their lovely lounges at Heathrow, and Virgin Atlantic, we're in the air, which is special.
That's amazing. I traveled by air for the first time on the weekend just gone, and it was a lot, because people like to drink a lot at airports, and while they're in the air, and to have no options is can be a bit stressful. So that if you're setting that standard, that's incredible, and I hope that only spreads.
I think it's a no-brainer, isn't it, really, when you think about it? But it's just no one had tackled that before, and lots of planes still, because I've obviously become slightly obsessed with it, to put it mildly. I was on a plane the other day and checking, and I said, what alcohol-free have you got? Because I've been doing a bit more business travel recently from the UK, and it's like the classic sort of Coca-Cola, herb tea, it's like, okay. So I think a lot of planes need to be inspired by what BA and Virgin are starting to do.
Yeah, I love that they've taken that by the reins. It's so promising, I think. So I feel like Noughty, you've set the bar so high. You're vegan, you're halal, you're organic, you're B Corp certified, and you're really, really low on sugar. Why were all of those things so important to you?
Well, for individual reasons, and I know in the wine business it's not always possible for many reasons to tick those off. Each had their own meaning. So let's start from the back and work back. I'm trying to remember now, like that game where you take things off the tray. So B Corp certification was huge for us, and right from the beginning of launching the business. For anyone who doesn't know, it started in the US, and it's really about putting your cards on the table really officially and saying that we're about ethics and we're about purpose, and putting purpose alongside profit, to the point where we've got it written in our articles that we will make business decisions based on ethics and not just profit. And that's huge if you've got outside investment. But I think what was interesting about B Corp, and we got our certification a few years back, is that suddenly everybody is really recognizing that will is now the only way to do business. And of course, corporates are desperate to jump on board. And, already we're getting a lot of stories about potential greenwashing, which of course is a horrendous thing. But on the positive sort of philosophy shows me that, even your ugliest companies ethically recognize that commercially they need to be doing the right thing. So I think it's like that thing, isn't it, with the pendulum, you've got to swing a long way one way. So while it's completely shocking if people are greenwashing in their business, I'm delighted that they think and recognize that that's the only way to do business now. So they sure as hell better put their ducks in a row behind the scenes. And I think consumers are starting to vote with their feet. And I'm delighted that that's the younger generation who've been, leading that charge. The kids and teenagers and 20-somethings are the ones who are saying, we will support brands where we know that they are ethically sound. And so I think that's super exciting. It was very hard to get the certification, as it should be, because they take it very seriously.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work that goes into that, isn't there? There's a lot of work.
Absolutely. And each year, you can't rest on your laurels. Each year it's about striving to do better, and it's about our packaging, our partners, every aspect of the business. We have to question what we can do better. And we're certainly not perfect. Nobody is. But I think it's about having that openness to constantly innovate in every arena. So that's B Corp. The vegan certification was an interesting one, having grown up plant-based. I recognized that some wines were using animal products, dairy products, essentially. Historically, it was fish guts, in their filtration process. So when it comes to the fining of the wine, when you're taking out the sediment, and lots of wines don't. But again, it was about going back to that transparency of labeling. It's a very historical business on my side of the world. But, we've not innovated in the industry in terms of transparency of ingredients. And so it was about saying we are officially vegan. We are not using animal products. And therefore, what was brilliant for us was the vegan community the plant-based community jumped on Noughty. Now, it wasn't that we were rare in being a vegan certified wine. It was the fact that we had gone as far as to get the certification and shout about it. So I guess a lot of wines are vegan, but don't bother to get the certification and don't think it's important. So it was us recognizing the plant-based community as being important and wanting them to know they could have comfort that we weren't using any animal products in our bottles. Organics I am obsessed with. I appreciate it's not always possible. I mean, in Champagne, for example, they often use what they call reasoned intervention. It's very difficult with their climate to be 100% organic. And then the other confusion in organics is each country has a different legislative body and a different benchmark. So what's organic in the US is less strict than what's organic in Germany. So the wine industry, we're all in our little vacuums, and yet we're selling globally. But so it's very difficult for the consumer to trust a lot of things that they're trying to understand about our industry, because each country will have a different sort of ruling. So for us, we knew the German organic system was very rigorous and famously rigorous. And so I was delighted that we were able to make Noughty with an organic certification. Interestingly and importantly, our grapes are Spanish and coming from Spain to Germany, but the organic standard is there. Then I'm trying to think, my memory is now failing me. Halal, most importantly, absolutely importantly for those who don't drink for religious reasons. The halal certification was a challenge, and we needed to be 0%, as in 0%. Amy, you'll obviously know, and for some of you watching who don't know, usually the cutoff for alcohol-free or non-alcoholic, as it's called in different countries, is 0.5% alcohol, which is essentially trace. And you'll often hear people say, oh, right, banana has more than that, and a vinegar does. So 0.5 is a very safe sort of usage that you can't go over to say that you're not alcoholic. But to be 0 alcohol, that's a whole other ball game. And I think for alcohol-free winemakers, that's a very particular challenge, because often for the flavor, it's a little easier if you retain just that touch and you come in at maybe just under 0.5, but then you can't be halal certified because you need to be 0 to get that certification. So if the Muslim drinker wants to drink Noughty in the Middle East, you know, for example, where we've got lovely growth, we had to be 0%. So that ticks that box, which was a very proud moment. For our non-alcoholic still wines, we won't have a halal certification. It is between 0 and 0.5, but just at the moment, we're calling it de-alcoholized, and we're saying it's just under 0.5. Just because at the moment we can't guarantee we can get it down to 0%.
Yeah. Is that something to do with how you've had to build it back up being a still wine? Is that where the difference lies between the sparkling and the still? Like with the sparkling, you've got the body of the bubbles to kind of help bolster what's missing from that tiny little bit of alcohol?
Potentially. I think you might have hit the nail on the head. I think it's a number of things. Flavor, most winemakers will tell you, is easier to retain at the published 0.5 level. You know, the 0, you can often stray into something that's more akin to that sort of weak fruit juice territory that we've been used to, which, you know, is not where I'm trying to go with the brand. Yeah. But I was delighted that Noughty, the sparkling, Brut and Rosé, works beautifully at that level and didn't need to be 0.5. So I think you've touched on the important bit. Yeah, but for me, it's all about the taste and the flavour. Yeah, so that's how we've come to that decision.
Yeah. The brand name, Noughty, it's very clever. It's obviously a play on words, being, you know, you can be naughty when you're drinking real champagne, and the Nought proponent of the alcohol content. How did the name come to you?
It was exactly the sentiment you've described so beautifully there. It was this interesting dichotomy for me, which was the fun element, but also the serious element. So I'm super serious about my wine and my liquid, and that's non-negotiable. I wanted that to sit alongside any champagne comfortably at the table, and luckily in beautiful restaurants it does. But also, this is wine, or albeit alcohol-free wine. This is fun. You know, it is about enjoying yourself. So that was that subtle play on words that I wanted. And then obviously naught with an O for 0%. It was interesting when we learned that in the US, they don't use the term naught. They only use 0. So yeah, I know, right? So that was another fun angle for, you know, we're growing beautifully in America. So it was nice. I guess it brought that nice Britishness. Oh, naught. You know, it was a whole new angle for them, which I hadn't realised, funnily enough, when we launched.
Ah, semantics, eh? So you're clearly a pioneer in the industry. You've been winning awards. You're internationally recognised. Does this inspire you to come up with the next big thing in the non-alc space? I mean, you're obviously releasing 3 new wines. Have you got big dreams, lofty dreams, stretching past those new 3 still wines?
I mean, I'm always innovating. I think all entrepreneurs are always coming up with new ideas. But for me, the next challenge, which is not a small one, is to be the world's leading premium alcohol-free wine. So really, I won't rest until we've reframed that around the world in key territories. So that's the current ambition, to get the stills launched successfully, and then to have, you know, all of the Noughty range benchmarked and on beautiful tables in restaurants, bars at home, alongside their alcoholic counterparts. So that is the not small challenge I've set myself next.
So essentially taking over the world. It's world domination.
Yeah, I mean, in a happy, friendly way, not in a sort of Austin Powers kind of way. It sounds kind of dark, doesn't it? But no, I think, without getting too deep, I think there's a huge opportunity to encourage everybody to drink better. You know, from a sustainability point of view, but equally from the point of view that alcoholism has been on the rise pretty much everywhere, across the past few years. And I think, from a virtuous health perspective, if you can get that buzz without the negative aspects, I think there is a world-changing opportunity there, truthfully. So that matters to me. But the most important thing is top line. We do it with something delicious while we're having fun. So I'm pretty serious about that goal. I think that there is an opportunity to help people's health actually while they're still enjoying themselves.
Yeah. Oh, and it does. It makes a massive difference. If someone can enjoy themselves and not have the fear of missing out and continue on with their health goals because they're having a good quality drink, then that's incredible. It is helping people with their health goals, and it's a very admirable, goal and direction that you have. I love it.
Thank you. Well, you've done an incredible job cheerleading. We love the fact that you found it so early. That means a lot to us.
When did you launch the Chardonnay?
So it was just the summer in London, pre-pandemic. So
right.
I'm terrible with dates. If we're in 22 now, that would be 2019, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So really not long ago, actually.
No.
I mean, I think it's been pretty crazy because we doubled down online and because our world's media was incredible. We had amazing press in Australia, amazing press in the US, UK.
Yeah.
And I think because everybody was gathered together collectively online, I think that lit the touch paper for the global media to say, we've got an alcohol-free here that's worth tasting. And then once the critics proclaimed it really damn good, that started the ball rolling. And we were in this really, I mean, I don't know if it's ever happened before, but we were in this amazing space as a new brand where we were almost auditioning distributors around the world on Zoom. I mean, it was pretty crazy. Usually you're begging. I mean, the way brands work, usually for anyone watching is you're usually begging for distribution. So we had the flip side. I said to my sales director, you're never going to get it this easy again. So don't you go complaining.
It's almost like a perfect alignment, really. Like, I mean, no one's happy that COVID happened, but it potentially did impact how quickly you were able to build your business, didn't it?
Yeah, we were one of those rare businesses that had an incredible opportunity, and so I took it. I mean, I was online. It was horrible, actually, for someone who gets a buzz off people. I love people. I like the real world. Obviously, I've come from a TV and media background, so I'm used to screens. But it's a really interesting one because you're very comfortable on the screen. But of course, anyone who is used to screens knows that you're always keeping your focus. I see kids and lots of other people in business. They'll sort of wander off, or they'll look elsewhere, or they'll do their nails, or they'll, pet their dog. And of course, that in a way is a lovely natural way of being on camera if it's appropriate in a meeting. But of course, for people like us who are used to cameras, you're always on. So I was, I suppose thought of it was like being back at the BBC presenting. But of course, from sometimes 7, 8 o'clock in the morning to deal with your country, right through to maybe Texas, California. So you're on late at night. So I was sitting at my Mac for a really unhealthy amount, but it paid dividends because we doubled right down and we've come out of the pandemic with incredible growth. So I think we've been very lucky. It's your classic sort of entrepreneur thing. The harder I worked, the luckier I got. You know what I mean? But we had an opportunity.
Yeah. Are your family involved in the business? I know that it's Thomson and Scott Noughty. Who is the Scott in the Thomson and Scott?
Scott's kind of this fictional character that I wanted people to think originally I had a man by my side. The wine business on my side of the pond, and certainly I trade in France, it's notoriously male dominated, and particularly at the higher echelons. And I wanted that kind of feeling of like a real historical sort of brand that feels like it's been around for a long time. And that's what Thomson and Scott had, that heritage feel. I had a few sort of jokes about it. My husband's Scottish, and he's our comms director. He's an amazing publicist, a brilliant publicist from the film and TV world. And obviously I couldn't afford his fees when I started, but I'm married to him and he's got shares in the business. So he's done all our PR, and he's done, I think, most people are saying this crazy job, because he had all kinds of drinks industries desperate for him to publicize them. And he's like, I don't do drinks. I only do Noughty. He's still working in the film and TV world. And I used to sort of have this joke that I would only ever share the story if I'd had, I don't know, it used to be 3 bottles of champagne, and obviously now it would have to be 3 bottles of Noughty, but I guess that we could do that easily over dinner. So yeah, so it's become one of those sort of folklore stories, really, the Scott thing.
That's hilarious. It's a total ghost person. I love that. Oh, well, what have been your biggest challenges in creating Noughty? Has it been the technical side of things? Has it been, being a female in a traditionally male-dominated space? What's been the biggest hurdles for you in the last few years?
I think it depends on the day. There's a challenge. I mean, yeah, in any entrepreneurs group, there's a challenge every day, pretty much. If you don't have a challenge, you're surprised. The taste was, I talked how taste is my buzz. I'm obsessed with palate and taste, and that was no question the biggest challenge, and remains. I mean, my still wines I'm just delighted with, but I'm constantly innovating because nothing's ever perfect, right? So, so taste, absolutely. I think realistically, it's not a very sexy answer, but recently, with the way macroeconomics has been going and global shipping and the combination we had on our side of the pond of Brexit, COVID, I mean, now we're speaking with a horrendous war going on, which obviously we won't get into, but I think, just shipping things across the globe remains an incredible challenge. Obviously with one eye on sustainability, my romantic vision at whichever point will be to make with a respective maker in a respective territory when the opportunity is there and relevant. So, that would be on the cards, but obviously Rome wasn't built in a day. Going back to your point about being a woman in a male-dominated industry, I think I cut my teeth beautifully. I've always really had that in my career. I was in a newsroom. I was born in the 70s, so I was really early in newsrooms with all kinds of really tough guys. So I had a background in journalism with alpha males, and so that's not been a problem to me, and actually was probably very good training for the conventional wine business. So I like nothing more than being patronized. And what I mean by that is I will happily take that on. And I think ultimately, I used to talk about how it was kind of a secret weapon, because for quite some time in the early days of me building my brand, I used to have this sort of really hilarious thing, which I'm not saying it's a good thing. Of course it isn't. And we don't want our daughters to go through this. And I think a lot of brilliant modern men will hopefully ensure it doesn't. But there was this thing, like Amanda's doing her little thing. Oh, Amanda's just doing this little thing with champagne, like this idea that I was sort of making champagne at my kitchen table, and so it was kind of a secret weapon, because I was like, well, the longer you think I'm not relevant, the longer I can have to innovate before I come out in the industry and make a huge impact, which I always think, the way you prove people wrong is your success, and nothing's sweeter than that. And so, I think as a journalist, I was trained to be quite plain speaking. I think being married to my husband, who's a publicist, has probably in the public domain shaved off my rough edges, because I'd always like a debate and a challenge. But he just taught me in this industry sometimes just to say nothing, smell sweetly. And I used to have this thing, I go, oh, you think that? Oh, that's really interesting, you think that. And of course, whenever Brits say that's really interesting, we mean that it isn't interesting. But you sort of smile, and then you quietly go on and take over the world with your beautiful bottles. And it's lovely people that sometimes call now or email, oh, do you fancy having lunch now? I just think it's a small world, and everything comes around. And I think, the only way I need to prove myself is with the brand being successful.
Yeah, and the quality of your product.
Right.
Yeah, there's a quote on your website that says, "It doesn't have to be alcohol to be rock and roll." Are you the rock and roll non-alcoholic alternative?
I don't know. I hope so. You tell me. You're the sober socialite. This is up, which I just think is the best title ever. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. It is. I think choosing to not drink is really rock and roll. It's really punk. It's really, you're going against the popular consensus, aren't you, when you choose to not drink alcohol? So yeah, and I think, and with Noughty leading the way, maybe you are the rock and roll alternative. I love it.
Well, I can't wait for the party. It's so weird, isn't it? How I feel like I've got new friends like you in the industry, and yet because of the way the world's gone, we've never met. I mean, when we all meet together, when we all have this global convention, I mean, it'll be crazy, right? It'll be
It's gonna be a
so
good party.
fantastic when we all get together.
Yeah, the world might melt. It's going to be that good. So we are seeing more and more extension brands pop up. I don't know if this is happening in the UK as much as it's happening here. Like big Australian wine houses are all bringing out their non-alc ranges, and I see it as a pretty, obvious money grab. They're seeing the opportunity in the market and they're not wanting to miss out. And to me, it's not a super positive. What sets Noughty apart from these products and these brands?
Well, I don't want to become a bore, but a taste, I would hope. That's the ultimate for me. Like I've kept mentioning, I think branding wise as well, I like to think that I've taken that pretty seriously. I really wanted that position, the elegant branding where you feel like you take that to dinner and people are like, whoa, what's that? And then we have this really wonderful buyer who's a fine wine obsessive. I mean, he's well, super wealthy, I'm guessing, from what's in his wine fridge and cellar. But he'll have his Chateau Lafite, he'll have his old world Bordeaux, his incredible champagnes alongside Noughty, and that for me is testament to that thing that I wanted with the brand. So I like to think that really taste front center, but equally importantly, sitting, alongside, just behind is the branding. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that lots of people are piling in from a financial point of view, and there's no question that's happening across the world. Absolutely. I like to hope and believe that eventually the game has to get raised, because discerning drinkers will take one bottle of the cheap stuff, won't they? And they will never buy it again. And so you'd hope then we get that transition to the good stuff. I guess there is that gap in the middle that we've touched on, which is you can lose them, because then you just get people going, oh, well, it's all crap. So we have to be careful that doesn't happen. And that's why we work very hard to set ourselves apart. And I think, there's no getting away from price point in this conversation. And I was always obsessed on my wine course in Paris with the right quality for the right price. And my sommelier teacher used to laugh at me because I would always ask the price of the wine I was tasting. And he's like, why are you just obsessed with pricing? And I said, because for me, I'm always searching for something really beautiful and delicious at the right price. And I think Noughty is that. And it's not cheap. And nor should we be afraid to say that. And I think you're going to get what you pay for ultimately, because if you're paying nothing, then the liquid will be worth nothing, because you're just having to pay for the glass, and particularly now in the modern world where dry goods are becoming expensive. So if people are buying really cheap stuff in the alcohol-free world, it's exactly like alcoholic wine. You buy cheap stuff, there's nothing in that liquid apart from water, sugar, and chemicals, because that's all you can make for the price point. So I think people have to get away conceptually, when they're new to the alcohol-free space, from assuming they're going to pay a lot less. because you're not, because alcohol as a component is not expensive, actually. I mean, think about how winos, sadly, can buy super cheap alcohol. Pure alcohol is not the component where the expense comes in. So I think people have to stop thinking that it should be cheaper and start recognizing that you've arguably got more complexity in the process, because you're building something, then taking it apart, then creating something else.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not a cheap, easy liquid to produce when you want something good.
No.
So there is that complex education piece for a certain amount of the consumer community, who aren't just grabbing it, because it's really interesting to see the consumers. You know, I've had the sober community just grab it, try it, love it. You know, pregnant women, the same. Anyone driving, you know. So you've got everybody who finds you straight away. Then you've got the early adopters who love a trend and recognise it's achingly fashionable to be alcohol free. Talking of being a sober socialite, but then that complex piece of education, which I think historically, certainly on my side of the pond, exists much more in the old wine world, where you'll just get alcohol-free wine. What's the point?
Yeah.
And then the shutters come down, and I also think you know, some people are scared of innovation. You know, if I had a wine brand that was really stuck in my ways, and I never wanted to innovate, and I was a bit nervous about sales, you know, I think fear can make people shut down, can't it? And we find sometimes the most closed, snobby people, if I can ever get them to taste, oh, well, it's actually quite good, isn't it? You know, oh, yeah, funny that, you know, yeah, it's actually damn good. Can I have another glass? And, oh, where do you sell? You know, I think a lot of people who are closed-minded, it's more to do with fear than it is anything else. And it's about taking the time to help them to come to a place where they feel comfortable to taste.
Yeah. So from your wine background, when you were, you know, doing your training in France and everything, have you reconnected with anyone from that historical background and had the Noughty experience and had positive feedback for you?
Yeah, I mean, they were always superficially friendly with me. The wine crowd, I've not had a formally bad experience with. A lot of them have been lovely. It's been a bit more oblique, you know, like on social media, or, you know, it's not been, I think, like a lot of things, particularly in Britain, we're not often upfront about things. I think different cultures are, you know, so it would be much more masked. But I mean, we're on the list of 67 Pall Mall, arguably the world's most famous wine club. I had a bottle of Noughty there yesterday for a lunch meeting, and we're launching there in Singapore. I mean, JancysRobinson.com, who's one of our most famous wine critics and has site around the world, it was their site and their reviewer Tamlin that declared it potentially one of the best alcohol-free wines ever. You know, so absolutely the best critics have embraced us. So it's not been an official negative thing. You know, it's a funny thing being British. Often you'll know we don't say what we mean. It's a bit more veiled.
Yeah, I have British parents, so I totally pick up what you're putting down.
Like that's really interesting. Never going to think about that again.
I have one final question for you, Amanda, and then I'll let you get on with your day. What has surprised you most about your journey creating Noughty?
What surprised me most is, and this goes out to every single entrepreneur who's watching, thinking that they've got the seed of an idea. What surprised me most, it hasn't strictly surprised me because I've always been very ambitious. It has surprised me the speed at which we were able to gain global recognition, and I can have such a big impact on the wine world in just a few years. And I put that down to a good idea. Obviously, you need to have a good idea to start with.
Yeah.
A really clear vision and an insane amount of hard work. And I think there's no real secret sauce with entrepreneurship and doing something that impacts the world. It really can be broken down, I think, to those three components. And I think what stops people really achieving their dreams is the fear of starting. And it's that simple. And I always say, you've got to start. And I think so many of us get to the end of our lives. I don't mean to be too maudlin, but, just never having done that. And it's just as simple as starting. And it's taking that one step. And I think so many of us fear that. And that comes down often, particularly with women. I see it all the time with confidence. So I think if you've got a brilliant idea, if it often is just the confidence you're lacking, deal with the confidence and just take that step and start. And it will end up wherever you want it to end up if the idea is good enough and you put the hard work in. It's really, that for me is such a truism.
You just got to put the hard work in and have a dream.
You do. Yeah. There's no shortcut there,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I've
loved it. Thank you for having me. It was a real honor.
Yeah, it's been amazing to learn more. I mean, I always feel like I'm kind of quite well versed in the Noughty story, having been with you since the beginning of my sobriety. But I've learned a fair bit more about you today, so that's been really, really great. And thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Amy, and for your support.
So remember, for all of your non-alcoholic drinks recommendations, head to drybutwit.com.au. Join me next time on Dry But Wet Meet the Maker podcast as I chat to another creative producer and learn about their product and passion.